I found out later from Lauren that John, who I'd known for years,
John Belushi,
even before SNL, had been quite kind of jealous about my rise to fame.
You invented that. So it might seem
Oh, shit, I'm sorry.
For decades, he made audiences laugh with his sharp timing and classic characters, but off-camera, he was a storm of ego, insults, and explosive feuds. From Saturday Night Live to hit movies, he left behind a trail of burned bridges, bruised egos, and bitter enemies. Co-stars dreaded working with him. Directors avoided him. And even Hollywood legends found themselves in his line of fire. Join us as we unravel the 5 stars who landed on Chevy Chase's bad side and never recovered. Number 5. Chevy and Glover, the feud that chattered Community. Chevy Chase could be considered one of the most disliked comedians in Hollywood. Stories about his troublesome behavior off-stage have circulated for many years, whether it was during his stint on Saturday Night Live or while working on Dan Harmon's Community. Chase frequently found himself in conflicts with fellow cast members and showrunners. Chase has also been reported to have issues with his co-star Donald Glover, after Chase remarked that people think he's funnier because he's black. Glover portrayed Troy Barnes on Community for 5 seasons. He mentioned that Chevy Chase frequently made racist jokes in between takes and deliberately tried to ruin his scenes. There was even a time when Chase told Glover that the only reason people found him funny was that he was black. Dan Harmon stated that Chevy Chase was simply acting out of jealousy because he recognized how incredibly talented Glover truly was. Donald Glover made a rare public appearance to present one of his colleagues with a prestigious award at the 75th Annual Writers Guild Awards in NYC. The writer, producer, actor, and comedian honored Atlanta executive producer Paul Simms with the Herb Sargent Award for Comedy Excellence and Mentorship, mentioning how he collaborated with the legendary producer over the years. However, Glover took the opportunity to throw some shade at his former Community co-star and veteran comedian Chevy Chase, who notoriously directed slurs and racial insults at him while they worked together a decade ago. While discussing Herb Sargent, the former Saturday Night Live writer for whom the award was named, Glover highlighted that Sargent was the one who originally came up with the Weekend Update segment that Chase hosted and still exists on the show today. Glover stated during his speech that Chevy Chase once called Herb one of the funniest writers working in television. Glover tried to say what Chase called him, but he paused, stating that the moment was about Paul. According to The Hollywood Reporter in 2012, Chase apologized immediately after using the N-word while questioning the dialogue his character had in a scene with Glover and fellow co-star Yvette Nicole Brown. The report claimed that the slur was not aimed at either of the show's black stars, but both were nearby and could hear it. Production was briefly paused before the actor returned to apologize. Later, Glover shared with The New Yorker that he felt Chase was like a legend who just wouldn't accept that he was no longer at his peak. Although Chase's comments were definitely out of line, Glover never seemed to let them affect him negatively. To him, Chase was just flailing around in a futile attempt to resist the passage of time. But deep down, he was just a frightened little boy, worried about what the future held. In a 2018 profile in The New Yorker about Glover, Dan Harmon, the creator of Community, shared that Chase often made racial jokes and comments towards Glover while they were filming, trying to throw him off his game. Harmon thought this behavior stemmed from jealousy over Glover's obvious talent at such a young age. Glover mentioned that he pretty much ignored it back then. To clarify his point further, Glover mentioned Chase again later in his speech when he talked about working with Simms for the first time while filming a guest spot on Girls, where he was an executive producer at that time. Chase left the show after season 4, just 4 years after returning to television, and faded back into the background. He's had a few jobs in recent years, but nothing that really made a difference. Just enough to bring home the bread, as Chase puts it. If things were bad with Glover, they were even worse behind the scenes with the man running the show. Let's uncover Chevy's bitter feud with Dan Harmon. Number 4. When the star hated the showrunner inside the Chase and Harmon war. Chevy Chase has faced numerous challenges during his time in Hollywood. Although he is considered one of the original members of SNL, his successes in the 80s and 90s were limited after he departed from the late-night comedy show. His ongoing struggle with alcoholism, along with frequent conflicts with co-workers, severely impacted his career and strained his ties to Hollywood. That was until he joined the Community. After achieving fame with the National Lampoon's vacation films Caddyshack and Fletch, Chase's career began to decline, and for valid reasons. His time in rehab during the 80s did not help him land roles, and his reputation for being difficult to work with certainly didn't assist him either. This trait would eventually come back to haunt him when he needed support the most. From the very beginning, NBC's Community encountered its share of issues. With the show's creator, Dan Harmon, already known for being challenging to collaborate with, bringing Chase into the mix was likely not the best decision. Chase was cast as Pierce Hawthorne, a member of a group of community college students who come together in a fictional club led by Jeff Winger. When the show debuted in 2009, no one could have predicted that working with its creator would be tough. But working with Chase would be just as challenging. The combination of these two personalities resulted in one of the most notorious feuds in television history. When Chase came on board, it was clear he didn't belong with the cast. He was this old Hollywood reject who hadn't had a job in ages and had a reputation for causing trouble with his fellow actors. Even in the show, his character wasn't well liked, and Chase himself seemed to have a dislike for everyone and everything, which naturally led to some clashes. In 2012, the Dan Harmon's Poops, better known as Harmon's Tumblr page, really blew up. At that time, Community was just behind The Office in popularity, but a feud sparked between Harmon and Chase, and depending on whose side of the story you believe, neither was completely innocent. Reports from Deadline indicated that Chase walked off the set on the last day of filming for Season 3 and didn't complete his scenes. Fast forward to the wrap party, where Harmon supposedly gave a speech that included a shout-out of a curse word in front of Chase's whole family. Harmon ended his speech by encouraging the cast and crew to join him in a curse word directed at Chase. Chase left the party and later sent Harmon a very explicit voicemail that could only compare to his Clark Griswold Christmas bonus meltdown. The voicemail, which Harmon frequently played for others, explained why Chase had stormed off the set and what happened at the wrap party. According to Chase, he left because he didn't receive the script in advance, but others claim he walked out because he didn't find the episode funny enough, which is something Chase would definitely do. Someone on the set mentioned that the conflict was inevitable due to their personalities. Following that, Harmon was let go just before they started filming Season 4, mainly because of his repeated late scripts and his constant insults towards the executives. He also struggled with alcoholism and would frequently doze off on set, which led to the creation of a Tumblr page called Sleepy Harmon. He was brought back for Season 5, but the show ended up being canceled after Season 6. In a 2013 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Harmon discussed his feud with Chase. The initial conflicts between the two began when Chase had issues with how Harmon was portraying his character, but Harmon would often turn Chase's outbursts into storylines. Harmon explained that Chevy is a confused old man, but he's also the guy who calls you to his trailer, waves the script around and says he's not a confused old man. He's sexy. He could be the star of the show, and he's not gay. Harmon would respond by asking if he realizes that what he was saying is funny and creates an interesting character. He would just blink at him and say he just didn't think it's funny. Chase, despite being somewhat unhappy, agreed to participate in Season 4, but referred to it as a mistake. Chase mentioned that he and Dan were friends again. He's really smart and can be quite funny. The main reason he wanted to join the show initially was because of Dan's writing. He still believes that, but he needed to leave, as he was really busy working on Community's Ice Capades extravaganza. Chase shared that the hours are terrible, and it's still just a sitcom on TV, which he thinks is probably the least respected type of television. He believes that the reason he had stayed is that he really didn't care about the kids, the cast. They were all very talented. His feud with Dan Harmon wasn't his first major fallout. Let's uncover the shocking way Chevy left Saturday Night Live and why it still stings today. Number 3. The shocking exit that rocked SNL. Since people don't see much of him, it's easy to forget that Chevy Chase was the first star of Saturday Night Live. He was tall, good-looking, and hilarious, and he really stood out in the first season. After that, he starred in several screwball comedies during the 1980s, including some with fellow original SNL cast member Dan Aykroyd, who has always spoken highly of him. The Ghostbusters star referred to Chase as one of the largest-hearted and most magnanimous friends he has, while Dana Carvey called him a sweet guy. However, Aykroyd and Carvey are in the minority. Chase apparently left SNL, which was just called Saturday Night back then, with more enemies than fans. Over the years since the show made him famous, many unsettling stories about Chase have surfaced. It's not just the SNL cast and crew that he has upset. In 2019, he made headlines again after a surprise stand-up performance at the Los Angeles Comedy Store, which did not go over well. People who knew him during his Saturday Night days say that Chevy Chase let his sudden fame get to his head. NBC executives quickly recognized him as the standout star of the original cast, and he was aware of it. His status as America's new favorite comedian was solidified just before Christmas in 1975, when he graced the cover of the influential New York magazine. After that, he was asked to do many interviews, and he agreed, telling anyone who would listen that he was determined not to become one of those arrogant celebrities, but it seems he was already on that path. According to the Chicago Tribune, Chase loved to boast about his fame in front of his colleagues. He reportedly said to a room full of people that he'll go down to the drugstore, pick up the fan magazines, and he'll bet his name is in more of them than any of theirs. When New York Magazine featured Chevy Chase's face and his famous line, "I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not," on its cover, it made two significant statements. First, it proclaimed Chase as TV's hottest new comedy star. It wasn't really up for debate. If he wasn't already the hottest new comedy star before the magazine was published, he definitely was by the time it reached stores. However, the magazine made a second, more daring assertion while referring to Chase. It claimed that it was a testament to television's power that after half a dozen appearances on a late-night show, he was the heir apparent to Johnny Carson. Carson had pretty much been the face of NBC since he started hosting The Tonight Show in 1962. Being called his successor was a huge deal, but Chase brushed off the idea, subtly criticizing Carson in the process. He remarked in his New York Magazine cover story that he would never be tied down for 5 years interviewing TV personalities. Carson, who was known to dislike the style of comedy on Saturday Night Live, didn't respond immediately, but he made his feelings about Chase clear when he spoke with author and journalist Tom Shales the next year, saying that Chase was viciously effective at putting people down. Jeff Weingrad and Hill interviewed several original SNL staff members for their book, including writer Alan Zweibel. Zweibel mentioned that Chevy Chase and Michael O'Donoghue, who was part of the very first SNL sketch, were Lorne Michaels' brain trust during the first season, and they apparently weren't very modest about being the favorites of the boss. The authors described Chase as a brutally effective put-down artist, the kind who could pinpoint the one thing someone was sensitive about, maybe a pimple on their nose, and then joke about it without mercy. He often targeted the younger, less experienced writers on the team. If Chevy heard something he didn't like during a meeting, He wouldn't hesitate to say he doesn't think it was very good at all, and he usually smirked when he said it. Chase sought a new direction because he wasn't sure that the rest of the Saturday Night team could keep up with the high standards he set. As stated in Saturday Night, a backstage history of Saturday Night Live. The authors of the book spoke with a friend of SNL creator Lorne Michaels, who mentioned that Chase attempted to get behind Lorne's desk at that time, overstepping boundaries in his quest for more creative control. Lorne was shocked that Chevy was thinking like that. Another source shared that he had made Chevy a star, supported him, created a platform for Chevy's talent, and made him shine. Ultimately, Chase went behind Michaels' back and struck a deal with NBC for some primetime specials, leaving the entire Saturday Night team unaware. Lorne felt like King Lear. His first daughter had betrayed him, one writer commented. Most of the cast and crew shared similar feelings. Another writer told the authors of the book that Chevy was a scumbag for the way he left. He was deceitful and dishonest about the whole situation. When cast member Tom Davis asked Chase why he was departing, he allegedly replied, "Money, lots of money." However, the decision weighed heavily on him. Chase later confessed that he still mourns for all those years he could have spent there. If Lorne had embraced him and asked him to stay, he probably would have. His departure was loud, but his comeback may have been even louder. Let's uncover the disturbing moment Chevy targeted SNL's first openly gay cast member. Number 2. Chevy Chase's cruel joke that went too far. Chevy Chase has come back to SNL as a host 8 times since he left the cast. Some of those times went better than others. He might have been provoked before his clash with Bill Murray, but there's really no excuse for how Chase supposedly acted when he hosted the episode on November 16, 1985. Terry Sweeney, who was SNL's first openly gay cast member, mentioned that everyone was really excited to meet Chase, but he didn't meet their expectations. Sweeney remembered that when he arrived, he was a monster. He insulted everyone. Sweeney shared with authors James Andrew Miller and Tom Shales that Chase proposed a sketch where they would weigh him every week to check if he had AIDS. Chase got in trouble for that and had to apologize, which made him really furious, according to Sweeney. Sweeney stated that he was just beside himself, and it was just awful. He treated him horribly. He treated everyone horribly. Chase left such a negative impression on the cast that they tried to avoid him after the show. Sweeney noted that nobody wanted to be stuck in the elevator with him. He didn't know what Chase was on or what was going on in his head, but he was just acting crazy. Terry Sweeney is definitely not the only person Chevy Chase insulted when he came back to host SNL in November 1985. On that day, future Marvel star Robert Downey Jr. was also part of the cast, and he experienced Chase's sharp tongue, too. Sweeney mentioned that Chase made fun of Downey Jr.'s dad, the art house filmmaker Robert Downey Sr. Chase reportedly asked Downey Jr. if his father used to be a successful director and whatever happened to him. According to Sweeney, Downey Jr. looked pale. It seems like Chase's tendency to belittle others only got worse as the decade went on. In 1989, he had a meeting with director Chris Columbus about Christmas Vacation, and the actor did not make a good first impression. Columbus shared with Chicago Magazine that Chevy treated him like dirt. But he stuck it out and even went as far as to shoot the second unit. Then he had another meeting with Chevy, and it was worse. He called John Hughes, producer, and said that there's no way he can do the movie. He knew he needed to work, but he couldn't do it with Chevy. Fortunately for Columbus, he ended up directing Home Alone instead. While the Terry Sweeney incident left a bad taste, it was nothing compared to the all-out brawl Chevy had with Bill Murray. Let's uncover how it all went down. Number 1. Comedy legends collide. The night Chase and Murray threw punches. Saturday Night Live is, by its very nature and somewhat by design, a pressure cooker. Performers and writers are expected to compete just as much as they collaborate in the show's rush toward the unchangeable weekly airtime. As many backstage personalities have noted over the years, the Saturday Night Live formula isn't really good for anyone's mental health. However, the always tense atmosphere of SNL only once, according to the extensive behind-the-scenes history, erupted into actual physical violence. This occurred during the infamous episode on February 18, 1978, when former cast member Chevy Chase came back to host Saturday Night Live and found new cast member Bill Murray waiting with clenched fists, ready to settle some old scores. Chase's history with Saturday Night Live is one of rapid success, followed by widespread resentment. He was the undeniable star of the fledgling late-night show, with his recognizable name, face, and signature Weekend Update segment, making him the true centerpiece in the minds of Season 1 viewers. The fact that Chase's charismatic talents were a favorite of producer Lorne Michaels only added to his prominence in that first season, which quickly wore on the rest of the SNL cast. John Belushi, in particular, is said to have resented Chase's rise, feeling, not without justification, that his own superstar status from the National Lampoon Radio Hour and the stage hit Lemmings should have translated into this new, much more visible platform. Chase, for his part, didn't help the situation, gradually becoming infatuated with his media coverage and, as the 1970s staple substance made its way into the SNL offices, increasingly egocentric with his fellow cast members. The tension increased as the media, eager for excitement in this unusual late-night comedy series, started to boost Chase's visibility. An early magazine article about the show concentrated so heavily on Chase that it overlooked the rest of the cast, leading Lorraine Newman, Jane Curtin, and Gilda Radner, who were dismissively labeled as Chevy's Girls in the article, to collaborate on a girl group-style musical number. In this performance, the three sang their exaggerated admiration for Chase, with lyrics that were clearly laced with sarcasm. Chase departed from Saturday Night Live after its first season to pursue a successful film career in Hollywood, which left the cast feeling both relieved and somewhat anxious. Although SNL's initial ratings were improving, the show's future remained uncertain, and worries about how it would perform without its main attraction clashed with Belushi and Dan Aykroyd's confidence in taking center stage. When Bill Murray joined the cast in the second season, Michaels, while gradually introducing the audience to a few sporadic appearances by Chase in the first episodes, was cautious about how the raw but skilled Murray would be received as the new Chevy. In the years after Chase's exit, Saturday Night Live's cultural significance grew significantly, with the young Murray overcoming some initial nerves to establish himself alongside Belushi, Aykroyd, and Radner as audience favorites. So when Chase, just off a very familiar-looking NBC variety special, and while filming the soon-to-be-hit Foul Play in 1978, came back to host the 11th episode of SNL's third season, the rising movie star would discover that the backstage dynamics had changed quite a bit, and not in his favor. In their intense portrayal of the events that led to what is now known as the most notorious fight in SNL history, authors Doug Hill and Jeff Weingrad, in their 1986 behind-the-scenes book, Saturday Night, distribute the blame quite evenly. Chase didn't help his case by returning to his old stomping grounds with a sense of entitlement and arrogance, which many attributed to his inflated ego and increasing harmful substances use. He even insisted that the current update anchor, Curtin, be removed from her role for the evening. Chase reportedly said during a heated discussion in Michael's office that Jane can't be on screen with him at the same time. Another key figure in the brewing tension was Belushi, who many believe stirred up resentment over Chase's comeback. Chase's bad reputation, which was only reinforced by decades of shocked stories from his co-stars, didn't need any extra embellishment for the still-hurt SNL team. However, it soon became evident to newcomer Murray that if Chase was going to be taken down a notch, the tough Chicagoan would be the one to do it. Murray recalled in the SNL Oral History Live from New York that it was because he was the new guy, and it was kind of his job to do that. It would have seemed too petty for someone else to handle it. It's like he was pushed into it. The main instigator was Belushi, although Chase also points a finger at Michaels, who, according to Chase, saw the disaster coming but did nothing to stop it. Throughout that week of writing and rehearsals, Murray increasingly provoked the host, even interrupting a meeting to inform Chase about the cast and crew's frustrations regarding his behavior during the first season. In a particularly harsh display of the macho posturing that plagued SNL's early years, he insulted Chase's masculinity by bringing up Chase's alleged marital issues. Murray supposedly mocked an angry Chase, but telling him to go screw his wife, he heard she could use it. Chase, who never backs down from an insult, shot back with a jab at Murray's notoriously rough skin, mentioning that Neil Armstrong had landed on Murray's face. The atmosphere was charged for something to go horribly wrong between them, and it did at what could be the worst moment. Chase, seemingly getting ready for his cold open as his bumbling Gerald Ford, unexpectedly found Murray in Belushi's dressing room and confronted the younger actor. This led to a scuffle in the hallway, with both men throwing punches that, in a twist of fate, mostly hit Belushi as he and others tried to separate the fighters. Cooler heads and the 11:30 deadline managed to step in just in time for Chase to take the stage, but not before Murray delivered one of the most iconic and cutting insults ever. As film director John Landis, a backstage guest who would later direct Aykroyd and Belushi in The Blues Brothers in 1980, recounts, as the two heated and furious actors were pulled apart, Murray spat the insult, "medium talent," at the retreating Chase. Chase went on to do the cold open, complete with Ford's signature clumsy humor and his usual furniture-smashing fall, and then came out for his monologue, a lengthy and mediocre routine where the former SNL star tried to get audience applause with cheesy cliches meant to provoke a reaction. During the same night, a visibly shaken Michaels reportedly whispered that Chevy didn't have it that night. And while the overall episode might not fully reflect that sentiment, the pre-show tensions certainly seemed to influence much of Chase's interactions with Murray on screen. After tricking Update co-anchor Aykroyd away with a fake phone emergency, Chase actually shared the anchor desk with Curtin. Chase's slick attempt to similarly get rid of Curtin resulted in Curtin exploding, emphatically declaring that Chase should go back to Hollywood. It was his show, and he won't be pushed around. During the good nights, Chase simply waves a thank you and goodbye, while Murray, wearing a red hoodie, arrives late to the group farewell, pacing anxiously as Belushi and Aykroyd try to pull the serious Murray away in the background. Hill and Weingrad think Murray looks like he might leap over everyone to strangle Chevy as soon as the camera stops rolling. They could be right. Over the years, tempers have calmed down, with both Chase and Murray acknowledging some responsibility for the unfortunate incident, even though both actors have left a history of bad behavior on set and hurt feelings among their co-stars. Chase, for his part, finds a strange middle ground between moving on and claiming that if Belushi and others hadn't interfered, he would have shocked the tough Murray with his unexpected physical skills. The two would later share a memorable scene, showcasing their improvisational genius in Harold Ramis's Caddyshack just a few years later, with their mutual respect for each other's comedic abilities overshadowing the infamous Saturday Night Live altercation. Chase was one of the first cast members of Saturday Night Live, SNL, NBC's late-night comedy show. Throughout the first season, he introduced nearly every episode except for two, with the iconic phrase, "Live from New York, it's Saturday night." This line was often preceded by a comedic fall, referred to as the fall of the week. Chase became famous for his talent in physical comedy. In one sketch, he reenacted a real event where President Gerald Ford accidentally stumbled while getting off Air Force One in Salzburg, Austria. This depiction of Ford as a clumsy figure became a signature move for Chase, contributing to the public's perception of Ford as a somewhat awkward person, even though Ford had been a star athlete in college. Later on, Chase and President Ford developed a friendly relationship. Chase served as the original anchor for the Weekend Update segment on SNL. His signature sign-off, "Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow," was later brought back by Jane Curtin and Tina Fey. Chase also contributed comedy material for Weekend Update. Chase was only contractually obligated to SNL for 1 year as a writer and became a cast member during rehearsals right before the show debuted. He won 2 Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe Award for his comedic writing and live performances on the show. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.